This is Gemara Nedarim and Daf Ayin Hey. Today's shir is only shir for the month of Teves. Has been generously sponsored by a close friend of the Daf as a schos Eli Neshama for his father Aryeh Leib ben Rav Yaakov B'siyat Shmaya. The learning of the entire Chabura should bring Aryeh Leib ben Rav Yaakov to a higher iron place in Gan Eden Shel Ma'ila. We're holding on Ayin Dalet Amud Beis, and as we mentioned in the previous year, we did pull up a drop short, seemingly, as we are holding in Ayin Dalet Amud Beis, even close to the top of the Amud, where, let's pull up the top of the Amud, here we go, where approximately, 13 lines to the top of the Amud. First one line is Yitzchak, but as we'll see, we're about to quote a very long and lengthy Braisa as a raya to Rav Ami. Let's just remind yourself, what was Rav Ami, who was Rav Ami? Rav Ami was explaining the sheet of Rav Eliezer in the Mishnah. Rav Eliezer in the Mishnah said Yofer. Again, this was a Mishnah on Ayin Dalet of Ben Aleph, which you're trying to figure out what is the status of a Shemeres Yavam. Is that a Shemeres Yavam? Is he allowed? Excuse me. Is he allowed to be made for the Nedarim of his Yavama? We had a three-way machlokes in the Mishnah. Rav Eliezer said Yofer. Rav Yeshua said La'achad Avlo L'Shnayim. And Rav Akiva on the opposite extreme said he cannot be made for it all. And the shaila was, why does Rav Eliezer say Yofer? So Rav Ami explained yesterday on Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph that the reason was that they did a mimer. That is the way that Rav Ami explained Rav Eliezer, is that they did mimer, and mimer according to Beis Shammai is kaina kinyan gomer. So says the Gemara, Tanya nami hachi, let's bring a raya ke Rav Ami, like Rav Ami. Says a Braisa. Again, this Braisa is going to, at first glance, seem very similar to our Mishnah, as it's going to set the stage of this machlokes about a Shemeres Yavam, this three-way machlokes, just like our Mishnah did. And then the Braisa is going to add on a few critical ingredients, which is going to allow us to glean what exactly is the shita of Rav Eliezer. Says the Gemara, Shemeres Yavam, bein Yavam echad, bein shnei Yavamim. Rav Elazar Omer, Yofer. Rav Yeshua Omer, Lachav lo l'shnayim. Rav Akiva Omer, lo lachav lo l'shnayim. So the basic machlokes, Rav Elazar says yes. Rav Akiva on the opposite extreme says no. And Rav Yeshua in the middle says to one and not to two. Omer Rav Eliezer, explains Rav Eliezer, Omayim isha she'in lo chelek ba. Before one gets married to a woman, he has no chelik in her, actually tav al reshus, before he comes into her shos. Yet misha bas al reshus, hayning mer aloi. Yet, when you get married, then it's Gomar Loi. It's a full-fledged acquisition. Isha, sheyesh loy chelek, actually tavel reshusay. Ayavama, that you have a chelek in before you come to her shos. Now, what type of yavama do you have a chelek in before you come to her shos? This is the critical ingredient. Isha sheyesh loy chelek ba, koydem shabal reshusa. So the only case that you have a chelek in the woman, koydem shabal reshusa, is in a case of maimer. Is in a case, not in a regular case of yibam, or I should say in shemeres yavam, in the case that we're discussing, but rather the case is in a case that you did maimer. Therefore, when you actualize and you complete the acquisition, certainly you should have a chelik in it. So that's Rav Eliezer. Now those few extra words of Rav Eliezer are going to make it or break it in a moment, as the Gemara is going to come along, and the Gemara is going to articulate how we have this raya. But first we have to continue the Braisa. Again, 10 lines from the bottom. Shetigmar Loi, first words on the line. Amar le Rav Akiva, so Rav Akiva retorts Rav Eliezer. Loi, im amrit b'isha shekanu hu la'atzmai. A woman, a regular wife, you acquire by yourself. Kshev she'in loi chelek ba, kach ein la chelek ba. A regular wife, as we saw yesterday, before you get married, you have no right in her, and no one else has any right in her. She's a regular single woman. Toimer bi'isha, we say the same thing by a yavama that's waiting yibam, shehikneloi min hashemayim, in which Hashem sent you this kinyan, this acquisition, shem sheishloi imachi, like just like you have a portion in her. Kach ishla achilim chelik ba. So too, others have a chelik in her. The classical retort of Rav Akiva that we saw yesterday, that when we have two Yavamim, each one has a portion in this woman. Amar lo Rav Yeshua, responds Rav Yeshua, Akiva, Tevarech b'shnei Yavamim. That only explains two Yavamim. Ma'ata meishav al yavam echad. But Rabbi Akiva, you seemingly didn't even want it to let it work. By a case of yavam echad, why not? Amar Loi explains Rabbi Akiva, Klom chalaknu al yavam echad val shnei yavamim. Do we ever find, explains Rabbi Akiva, do we ever find a differentiation between one yavam and two yavamim? Excuse me, still trying to get rid of this cold cough flu. Do you ever find the differentiation between one yavam and two yavamim? Bein shasaba maimer, bein shloisaba maimer. Is there any differentiation when they did maimer, they didn't do whether they didn't do maimer? Ukshar devarim. For just like in other areas. Now, what are these other areas we're going to explain at the end of today's daf? Ukshar devarim. Just like in other areas of a yavama, that if maimer is done with her, then what? It's not a regular arusa. So too, kei nedarim. So too by nedarim. But lashon azeh omer ben azai. So ben azai. Ben azai, after hearing Rabbi Akiva, with his knockout punch, responds, or maybe better yet, gets up in the base medrash and proclaims, Chaval olecha ben azai. Oi, chaval ben azai, that what? Sheloi shimashta es Rabbi Akiva. That you did not serve, that you did not be meshamish Rabbi Akiva. As we see, Rabbi Akiva has such absolute gems. Ben Azai remarks how he wishes he would have hung out more and learned more from Rabbi Akiva. So that is the end of this long and lengthy brisa. Now what's interesting, and maybe this falls into Lashon HaNedarim Mishana, so often the Gemara will quote the brisa and leave it up to us to figure out what the raya is. But now the Gemara articulates, it continues on to today's daf, as we turn over to Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, Tanya Kavosei Ravami. What is the raya to Ravami? Where do we see in this brisa a proof to the way the Ravami explains? Says the Gemara in the top line of Ayin Hey Amud Aleph, Dikatani, because what did the brisa say when Rabbi Akiva responded? Bein shasaba maimer, bein shaloi asaba maimer. So we see from the fact that Rabbi Akiva replied that whether you did maimer or not, obviously Rabbi Akiva is talking back to Rav Eliezer. So obviously Rav Eliezer did distinguish between making maimer, doing maimer or not, just like Rav Ami explained. Inami, raya number 2 from this brisa, Mei Reisha, from the beginning of the brisa, Rav Eliezer's statement itself, which we pointed out as we read the brisa. Tikatani, as it said, Mishanichlas al Rishusai. What did Rav Eliezer say? When she comes into his rishos, Nigmar Aloi, it's completed to him. V'idoloi Kaddish, and if the case is not that they did Eris and Kedushin, they didn't do Maimer, my Nigmar Aloi. You can't complete something if you did not start something. So rather, Tivshoit Minei, it must be Kishasa B'Maimer. So says the Gemara, either from the wording itself of Rav Eliezer or from Rabbi Akiva's retort to Rav Eliezer, 2 different ways. We have a beautiful proof to Rav Ami that Rav Eliezer in the Mishnah, the reason why you could, yes, be made for the Nedarim, a Shemeres Yavam, while he's waiting for his Yavama, is because he did Maimer. Now we just wrap up loose ends of this Brisa. Ma yukshar dvarim kain. What did Rabbi Akiva mean when Rabbi Akiva said, so too in other areas, so too by Nedarim? What did Rabbi Akiva mean in which he said, what are the other areas in which a Yavama, that even if Maimer is done with her, is not considered like a full-fledged Arusa? Kain Nedarim, Dikatani. What did Rabbi Akiva mean? Amar Rav Achi Katani. What would happen if this woman is mezaneh after she did Maimer? The halacha is she doesn't get skila. Why not? If Maimer had the status of Erisin, she should get skila like any naira, any girl that did Erisin. Rather, Rav Akiva says we see Maimer does not have the status of Erisin. Amar Rav Ashi masnisanami deka. Rav Ashi says that in truth our Mishnah is meduyak according to this point that if one does Maimer, it's not considered Erisin to get skila. Ein yavama gemura liisha kshem sha'arusa gemura liisha. We see that the Mishnah said the words that a yavama is that gemura as as a wife, like a wife is, like a arusa is. So we see that even if Maimer is done, it's not the same status. So that's the Raya to Rav Ami. That's wrapping up loose ends of the Brisa. And now we continue with the new Mishnah on Ayin Hey Amud Aleph. Says the Mishnah, and this Mishnah is really the flip side of everything we've been talking about till now, as everyone will see very quickly. If someone says to his wife, excuse me, sound very familiar. Someone says to his wife, any Nedarim that you make while I'm on vacation, from today till you come back. So we've seen whether he's able to be mefer those Nedarim via a third party. This Mishnah says, what about Harehein Kayomim? Is he able to be Mekuyam? Is he able to certify? Is he able to certify the Nedarim that are made via the third party? So we spoke about, he's able to certify the Nedarim now before he leaves. We spoke about what if he says anything you do from now until then is Mefer. Now the question is, what if he says anything you do from now until then is Mekuyam? Says the Mishnah, Loi Amar Klum. But if he says, Harehin Mufarim, if he says that they are Mufar, they are revoked. Again, not al yedei apotropos like we saw last time, but by himself, pre-annulling all the Nedarim. Rav Eliezer, Mufar, v'chachamim moimrim. Nope, Eino Mufar doesn't work. Amar Rav Eliezer, explains Rav Eliezer. Im hafer Nedarim shaba'u lechlal iser. Says Rav Eliezer, I'll tell you a kal v'chaymer. If you're able to be made for a neder that has a full power of a neder, a woman makes a neder, and it's a full-fledged neder. It's ba'u lechlal neder, it has the status of a full-fledged neder. And that neder, you're able to be mefer. Lo yefer nedarim shaloi ba'u lechal iser. Should you not be able to be mefer nedarim before it comes to iser? Says Rav Elazar, a simple kal v'chaymer. If once the neder takes effect, he can undo it. Certainly, he should be able to undo it before it comes into effect. Amr loy, so the chacham respond, Harei oimer isha yikimenu v'isha yifirenu. No, esha ba lechal hakim, ba lechal hafer. The pasuk equates the two. So if you could be mefer, make him, you could be mefer. Loi ba lechlal hakim, loi ba lechlal hafer. Says Rav Chachamim, maybe you have a nice kal v'chaymer, but the Gzeres HaKosov teaches us that Akama and Afara go hand in hand. So now we begin the Gemara, which this Shaila is going to take us for the duration of the day. Ibayu Lahu, the Rav Elazar. Mechal Chalin Umevatzlin. According to Rav Elazar, that you can be pre-made for the Nedarim. That if a woman makes a ned, if a husband says any Nedarim that you make for the next month until you come home for vacation, should be mefer. Is the way that it works. What are the mechanics? Does it work that when she makes a neder, the neder stands, and then ubatelin, then afterwards it's batal, or maybe the way it works is loy cholin klal. Maybe his pre-afara, what the husband came and preempted the story, what it has the ability to do is it blocks the neder. So the way that we'll explain it is it blocking the neder from ever taking effect, or does the neder take effect and then right away is annulled? Says the Gemara, Lamay nafkamina. Interesting shayla, beautiful lumdis, but like says the Gemara, it doesn't sound like it has much relevance in reality. And from here we see from the Gemara's Teretz how every detail of lumdis always has a relevance in reality. Says the Gemara, you know what the case is? If someone else made a neder and made their neder dependent on his wife's neder, the hadei nadra, meaning his wife. So this man said his statement, any neder you make for the next month should be batal. And then 2 weeks later, she makes a neder. Someone else is standing next to this woman and says, and I also want to do the same thing. So now, explains the Gemara, if you're going to say that the neder is chal, it works, and then it's revoked, tifususa, then the other person's neder has that which to grab onto and is chal. If If you're going to tell me that the neder is never chal and it blocks it, loika mishasha, then there is nothing that the other person's neder. So the lumdis, the reason it makes a difference, whether it's blocking the neder or whether it's allowing it to be chal and then a moment later being undone, is does that moment in time when that neder would be alive. If someone else could grab onto that, if someone else could make their neder dependent upon that. A beautiful shayla. Mai. What's the halacha? Tashima, let's bring a raya Rav Eliezer. For the words of Rav Eliezer in the Mishnah, Nedarim Shabbat Lechal Isser. If you can be made for a neder that comes into Isser, lo yifr Nedarim, can you not be made for Nedarim Shabbat Lechal Isser? That you should certainly be able to be made for Nedarim that don't come to Isser. Shema minas, what do we see? Lo yichalin. We see it's never chal, because the whole premise of the Kal V'chomer of Rav Eliezer is that if you can make for a neder that's chal, you can block a neder. If not, there's no Kal V'chomer. Answers the Gemara, no raya. Interesting teretz. Mikatani shein ba'in, shaloi ba'u katani. Adayin loy ba'u. From the wordage of Rav Eliezer, even though perhaps the Mefarshim explained, perhaps in Svara, it would make a lot of sense. It says the Gemara, since the words of Rav Eliezer, we always have to first go with the words. Since the words of Rav Eliezer don't say that, Shaloi ba'u katani, it says they have not become aser, which means they did not yet become aser, but they will become aser. So therefore, we have no raya. Tashema, one more attempt for today. Amr lohen Rav Eliezer, Chacham respond to Rav Eliezer. Oma b'makom shein mefer nidrei atzmai. If you cannot be made for your own neder, excuse me, it's the Tosafos, it's not the Mishnah. Amr lohen Rav Eliezer, the Chacham, Rav Eliezer said back to the Chachamim. If in a case of one's own nedarim, where he cannot be made for his own nedarim after he made the neder, made for nidrei atzmai, ad shelo yidar, yet he can get rid of the future nedarim. Meaning, on one's own self, if I make a neder, can I be made for my own neder? Obviously not. That's ridiculous. I made the neder. I don't have the power to be made for the neder. But I do have a power to say, any nedarim I'll do in the future should not be chal. That does work. That's really what we say every year Rosh Hashanah. Every neder that we say in the future should not work. So we see that even though we can't undo what we did, we still have a power to block in the future. So makum shemei for nidrei ishtai. When it comes to one's wife, he could be made for them. He should tidar. Eino din sheyafer nidrei ishtai ad shloi tidar. He should be made for the nedarim before they are chal. My love the ishtai dom yodilei. So Gemara says, seemingly, the whole raya is that his wife is like himself. Ma'ahu, just like he himself, the little cholin. They're not chal at all, a block six. That's the only way it can work for one to be made for his own nedarim. To block it for every chalav. Ishtay nami, the cholin, so raya, that it blocks the neder. Answers the Gemara, lo raya, lo hakadisa, isa. It's not necessarily exactly the same mechanics when it comes to his wife and himself. Therefore, we're stopping over here. 2 attempts at a raya, 2 rebuttals to a raya. We'll pick it up from here in the next year. B'siyata Tishmai.